So here's something that kind of sounds backwards. The more options you put in your website navigation, the fewer people actually use it. Not because they can't find what they're looking for, but because you gave them too much to look at. So today I want to talk about what I call the option trap. And I know the option trap, that sounds like a marketing thing, but stick with me. It's a mistake I see on almost every advisor site I look at. And the frustrating part is that it comes from good intentions. Like you're trying to make your site easier to navigate, you're actually making it harder. I'm going to walk through what that looks like, why it happens, why it's so hard to catch when it's your own site, and what a cleaner version actually does for you. I'm Justin Hinkle, and this is the Travel Advisor Website Show. So picture this. Someone finds your website, maybe through Instagram, maybe a Google search, maybe a friend mentioned you. They don't know you yet, and they land on your homepage, and the first thing they do is kind of glance at your navigation to get their bearings. And your navigation has 8 items in it: home, about, services, destinations, your blog, resources, gallery, a contact link, and maybe a couple of those have drop downs with even more options underneath. And here's what happens in that person's brain: nothing. Not nothing as in they don't care, nothing as in they freeze. They're kind of scanning all 8 options. They're trying to figure out which one is the right move. And none of them are going to feel urgent enough to click on right away. So they do what people do when a decision feels hard, they leave. Not because your site was missing something, not because you weren't a good fit, because you handed them 8 choices before they even knew what they were looking for. That's the option trap. And almost every advisor I work with has it built into their website without even realizing it. So the option trap is this: you add items to your navigation to help visitors find things, but every item you add is also a decision you're asking them to make. And at some point, usually around 6 or 7 items, the number of decisions required to navigate your site starts working against you. And there's actually psychology behind this. It goes by different names: decision fatigue, the paradox of choice. But the core idea is pretty simple. More options don't always make it easier to decide. Past a certain point, more options actually make it harder. And when a decision feels hard, the easiest thing to do is nothing. Like, think about the last time you opened Netflix and couldn't figure out what to watch. You had thousands of options. You probably scrolled for 10 minutes and ended up putting on something you've already seen. And that's the same thing happening. Too many choices, and your brain kind of stalls out. And your website navigation is doing that to your potential clients. Except, unlike Netflix, they don't have 10 minutes to scroll around. They've got maybe 10 seconds before they decide whether to stay or to go. So the fix isn't to add more pages so people can definitely find what they need. The fix is fewer pages, better labeled, so they can find what they need faster. Here's what makes this hard to catch. Building the option trap feels responsible. It doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like thoroughness. Like you've got an about page, a services page, a destinations page, the blog, the contact page, maybe a resources section, a gallery of your trip photos, and you've worked hard on all of it. You're proud of it, and you want people to be able to find it. So you put it all in the menu. That's just being organized, right? The logic is sound, but the result isn't. Because here's the thing: you know your site. You've spent hours on it. You know exactly what resources means, why it's there, what's in it. You can navigate your own site in your sleep. So when you look at your navigation, you don't see a list of 8 ambiguous choices. You see a familiar map of a place you know really well. So your visitor, they don't have any of that context. They just landed 30 seconds ago. To them, 8 navigation items is not a helpful map. That's a wall of options that they have to decode before they can even take a single step forward. And that gap between how the site feels to you and how it feels to a complete stranger, that's exactly where the option trap hides. And it's why you almost always need someone outside your own business to help you see it clearly. The other reason it's so easy to build is that adding a page to your navigation costs nothing in the moment. You make a new page, you drop it in the menu, you're done. There's no immediate signal that you've made things harder on anyone. Your site still works, it still looks fine, but the damage is invisible. It shows up later in people who left quietly without ever booking a call. I want to address something here because I hear it all the time. If my site only has 4 or 5 pages in the menu, doesn't it look thin? Doesn't it look like I didn't put that much work into it? And I really get why that comes up. You've invested real time into building your site and you want that effort to be visible. More pages feels like more substance, but that's just not how it reads to a new visitor. Like, think about what actually signals credibility when someone lands on a site for the first time. It's not the number of menu items, it's whether the site looks professional, whether the copy sounds confident and specific rather than vague and kind of generic, whether there are real testimonials from real clients, whether the person's expertise comes through clearly, and, whether the whole thing feels like it was built by someone who actually knows what they're doing. Nobody has ever left a website thinking, I would have hired them, but there were only 4 things in the menu. What they think and what they feel, even if they can't quite articulate it, is either this was easy to use or I couldn't really figure out where to go. Clean navigation contributes to the first one. The option trap contributes to the second. A site with 4 well-labeled pages that clearly explain who you work with, what you offer, and how to get in touch with you will outperform a site with 10 pages pretty much every time. So, what does the right amount of navigation actually look like? For most travel advisor sites, I think you need 4 items, maybe 5. Home, about, people expect that. They know what it is, they keep it. Maybe you could do something for your services. You can call it services, how it works, work with me, whatever fits how you talk. And then, a way to get in touch. And this isn't even usually a menu item. It's a call to action button. Contact me, schedule a consultation, book a call, let's talk. So that's 4 things. I'd even consider an FAQs page, just, to answer questions and pre-qualify clients. And honestly, for a lot of advisors, that is enough. If you've got a blog you're posting to consistently, add that. If there's something specific you want to call attention to, a destination you specialize in, a free resource, you might be able to work it in. But once you are past 5 or 6 items, you're really kind of drifting back into the option trap territory. The goal isn't minimalism for its own sake. The goal is that a stranger can land on your site, glance at the navigation, and immediately understand how to find what they need. That's it. If your navigation does that job, it's working. If they have to think about it, it's not. And the option trap isn't just about how many items are in your menu. It's also about whether those items are labeled clearly enough that someone knows exactly what they're clicking before they click it. Because here's what happens with a vague label. Someone looks at it, they can't immediately tell if it's relevant to them, and then they just skip it. They might have been your ideal client. They might have been looking for exactly what's on that page. But since the label didn't tell them that, they moved on. Experiences is one I see sometimes, and I know what the advisor means, trips they plan, destinations they work with, maybe some sample itineraries. But to a stranger, experiences is kind of ambiguous. Is that testimonials, a blog, a portfolio of past trips? You can't really tell without clicking. And when you can't tell without clicking, a lot of people just won't. Versus if that same page was called services or how I can help, or even something specific to what the advisor actually does, luxury honeymoons, family vacations, whatever the specialty is, then someone knows right away whether that's what they're looking for. Resources is another vague one. Resources for who? About what? That's so broad, it doesn't really tell me anything. If it's a blog, call it a blog. If it's travel guides, call it travel guides. The more specific the label, the easier it is for someone to know at a glance whether that's where they want to go. And then the less work they have to do before they can actually move forward. So the test I use is pretty simple. Can someone who has never seen your site tell roughly what they're going to find on that page just from reading the label? If the answer is no, or even like maybe, your label needs work. It shouldn't require a click to figure out what something is. And while we're here, let me say something about dropdowns because I really think they're worth addressing directly. A dropdown is when you hover over a navigation item and a submenu appears with more options underneath. On desktop, that can work okay in some situations, but on mobile, it's really often kind of a mess. Hovering doesn't work the same way on a touch screen, so you tap, and sometimes the dropdown appears, sometimes it just takes you straight to the page, and it's just confusing. More importantly, dropdowns are usually a sign that you've got too much in your navigation, and you're trying to organize the overflow instead of cutting it. Like, if you've got a services dropdown with 5 things inside it, cruises, family vacations, honeymoons, luxury travel, group trips, that's 5 more decisions layered on top of the initial decision to click services. And I just ask, do those pages actually need to be separate? Or could one well-organized services page cover all of them? Because most of the time it can. And one page with clear sections is a much better experience than 5 pages someone has to hunt through a dropdown to find. And so this also connects directly to mobile, which I think deserves its own moment because it's where a lot of this gets really visible. On desktop, a navigation with 8 items looks busy, but at least it's all visible at once. On mobile, that same navigation collapses into what's usually called a hamburger menu, the three-line icon up in the corner. The visitor has to know to tap it. Some people don't. And even for people who do, when they tap it and a long list drops down on a small screen, you've kind of made the problem worse. Now they're processing 8 or 9 options on a 4-inch screen. You got to go open your site on your phone right now. Not later, like right now, as soon as you finish this episode, at least, tap the menu, look at what appears. Can you scan it in 2 seconds and know where you'd go? Does it feel manageable or does it feel like a lot? Most advisors built their site on a desktop and have never actually experienced their own site the way most of their visitors do. And here's the reality: the majority of people who find your site are going to find it on a phone first. They're scrolling Instagram, they see your content, they tap your link, and they're on your site on their phone. That's the experience that matters most. And if the navigation is a wall of options on a small screen, they're gone before they even get started. Okay, now let me talk about your footer. Your footer navigation, I think it's kind of misunderstood, and it ties to everything else we've been covering. The footer is the section at the very bottom of every page on your site, and it usually has some version of your navigation repeated there. Links to your main pages, contact info, maybe some social media icons, and that's completely fine and normal. People expect the footer to have links, and it's just how websites work. But the footer serves a different purpose than header navigation. The header is for orientation. It's how someone finds their way around when they first land on your site. The footer is more like the safety net. It's for the person who scrolled all the way to the bottom of the page and is now looking for something specific. Maybe they want your contact info. Maybe they want to find a page they passed earlier. The footer is where you go when you're kind of on a mission. And because of that, it's actually fine to have a bit more in the footer than you have in the header. You can repeat your main menu links, add your email address, link your social profiles, maybe a copyright line. All of that is expected and useful down there. What I see sometimes is advisors treating the footer like a second chance to put everything that's on the site: a full sitemap, a long list of destination pages, links to partner sites, all of it. And that creates the same problem as an overcrowded header. It looks cluttered, it's hard to scan, and it makes the simple task of finding your email address, harder than it needs to be. So in the footer, your core menu links, contact info, social media links if you want them, that's really enough. The footer's job is to catch people who need one more thing, not to give them another round of choices. Okay, so let me give you something concrete to actually go do, because I think it's more useful to have a real process than just general ideas. So, step 1, count. Open your site and count the items in your main menu. Just the top level ones. Don't count anything inside dropdowns. Write down the number. If it's more than 6, that's your first flag. Don't try to justify the count yet, just note it. Step 2, classify each item. For each item in your menu, ask one question: does a new visitor actually need this to take the next step toward hiring me? Not, is this page valuable? The page might be great. The question is whether it belongs in the primary navigation or whether it could live somewhere else. Some pages are important, but could be in the footer or linked from within another page without needing a spot in the main menu. And so be honest with yourself about which items are there for the visitor versus which ones are there because you worked hard on that page and want it to be seen. Step 3, test every label. Read each menu label like you've never seen the site before and ask yourself, do I know what I'll find there? Not roughly, not a guess, but specifically. If the answer requires any guesswork at all, rename it. This step is usually pretty quick. Experiences become services. Resources becomes travel blog. You're not reinventing the page. You're just making the label more accurate. Now, step 4 is check the label to page match. Click through every navigation item and ask whether the page you land on actually delivers what the label promised. And this is one that gets missed a lot. Like if your services page opens with 3 paragraphs about your personal background before it explains what you offer, that's a mismatch. The visitor clicks services because they want to know what you do. Give them that in the first few sentences, not after they have to scroll. Any gap between what the label suggests and what the page delivers creates a small moment of, wait, is this right? And those moments are friction, and friction costs you clients. Step 5, Go mobile. Pull your site up on your phone. Tap the hamburger menu. Look at what comes up. Can you find the most important items in under 3 seconds? Is anything cut off? Does anything feel like it probably shouldn't be there at all? And be honest with yourself. This is often where the option trap is most visible. Things that look fine on desktop can really feel overwhelming on a small screen. And step 6, watch a stranger use it. This is one most people always skip, and it's honestly the most valuable. Find someone who hasn't seen your site, whether it's a friend, a family member, anyone, and ask them to find 2 things: how to contact you and information about what you offer. Don't tell them where to go. Don't help at all. Just watch. Note every moment of hesitation, every wrong click, every time they have to backtrack through your site. And that's your real audit data. You'll see your navigation through completely fresh eyes, and it'll probably surprise you how different it looks from someone else's perspective. Now, that whole thing should take you an hour or less, and most of what you find won't require a full redesign. It usually just means removing a few items, renaming a couple labels, cleaning up a page or two. Pretty small changes, but they really make a real difference in how easy the site actually is to use. The option trap isn't really a design problem, it's a decision problem. Every time you added something to your navigation, you made a decision. And the cumulative effect of all those decisions is either a site that guides people forward or one that makes them work too hard to get there. Now, the good news is it's fixable, and it's not a big rebuild, it's just more of a cleanup. An hour with your own site, honest eyes, and the willingness to cut things that you worked hard on. And that's kind of all it takes to get out of it. But here's the thing I keep coming back to: your navigation is just the first place on your site where visitors have to make a decision. It's not the last. There's the home page, the services page, your contact form. Every one of those is another moment where the experience either builds trust or quietly chips away at it. And the advisors whose sites consistently convert, the ones where strangers land and actually book calls, they've thought through all of those moments, not just the navigation. That's pretty much what most of the content on this channel is about. So if any of this was useful, there's a lot more here worth sticking around for. I'm Justin Hinkle, and this is the Travel Advisor Website Show.